people in this city whose influence reaches far to every corner of the city and every place. I'm delighted and honored to stand here. And the sound of grace, the song of grace, is in the midst of this scripture I want to read to you this morning. It's a very interesting story from the Gospel of John in the 5th chapter. It presents Jesus in a kind of interesting setting and situation that we are puzzled by somewhat. Later on, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals. Now at the sheep pool in Jerusalem, there is a place of 5 colonnades. Its name in the language of the Jews is Bethesda.
All right, come on.
In these colonnades, there lay a crowd of sick people, blind, lame, and paralyzed. Among them was a man who had been crippled for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and was aware that he had been ill a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to recover?" "Sir," he replied, "I have no one to put me in the pool when the water is disturbed. But while I'm moving, someone else gets into the pool ahead of me." Jesus answered, "Rise to your feet. Take up your bed and walk." The man recovered instantly, took up his stretcher, and began to walk. That day was the Sabbath. So the Jews said to the man who had been cured, "It is the Sabbath. You are not allowed to carry your bed on the Sabbath." He answered, "The man who cured me said, 'Take up your bed and walk.'" They asked him, "Who is this man who told you to take your bed and walk?" But the cripple who had been cured did not know, for the place was crowded and Jesus had slipped away. A little later, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "Now that you are well again, leave your sinful ways, or you will suffer something worse." The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had cured him. A really interesting story. It's a story that has 3 acts. It could have been written by a playwright on Broadway. Jesus returns to Jerusalem, maybe for one of his last trips. He had planned all along to create a showdown in this ancient city. He was now coming to Jerusalem maybe for the last time. It's ironic that he entered the gate of the sheep gate. Jerusalem is a gated walled city, and there are many gate entrances throughout. Jesus came through the sheep gate. How ironic, because this is the very gate when sheep are being brought into the festival for slaughter that they enter. How ironic that Jesus enters this very gate where the slaughter is to come for him not too far away. But he enters this gate, and he goes through this gate, and he comes upon the pool, and he finds a man lame, waiting for a miracle. Legend has it that Jesus often came to Bethesda, and that even his parents of Mary, his grandparents, lived close by. And he often visited Mary and Martha, who lived close by, and sat many times at their table and took many meals and shared many of his ideas with them. So it's not unusual that he's in the area. And he sees this man. He's been there for 38 years, coming every day. Now that age in Jerusalem for a person to be old was near 50. If you made it to 50, you were very old. So this man has spent the better part of his life lying by this pool, waiting for somebody to come and put him in the water when the water's are stirred by an angel. Now what the man probably doesn't understand is that these waters are not stirred by an angel, they're stirred by the crack in the ledge rock that bubbles up every now and then, maybe with warm water. And the waters would have been warm, perhaps, and comforting, and they would have provided some kind of health. Healthcare in Jerusalem was very limited. Jesus found many people whom he touched or invited to be whole, and that was part of his work. So he's come to this place and he tells the man, rise up, take your bed and walk. And so the man immediately does. Now what's interesting about this story is what Jesus doesn't say or do. He doesn't stop to talk with the man and say, how's it going, my brother? How long have you been here? He doesn't say, could I bring you something to eat? Could I find you a place in the homeless shelter? Could I take you somewhere where people could look after you? He simply says, in some very sharp tone almost, pick up your bed and get on with your life and quit complaining. And you can almost hear that kind of sharpness in the remarks of Jesus. He had to be that, even with his own disciples. Remember when they were all heading to Jerusalem and they said, well, who's going to be Secretary of Treasury and who's going to be the manager of this? And Jesus had to be very sharp with them and remind them that they were talking foolishness while he was on his way to do something very serious. So he's not unaccustomed to commenting to people who got in his way. So, how did this man get there? Somebody had to take him, or maybe he had a stretcher that somebody carried and left him there every day. Imagine that, waiting for some magic event to be healed. Having done it so long, it probably became his occupation. It became his way of life. And the response of Jesus was not pity, not joining him in sharing his misery, but simply confronting him, that he had within him the very power and grace and goodness of God he needed to get up and get on with his life. But the man kept complaining, I don't have anybody that puts me in the pool. I don't know what to do, and so I just sit here and everybody gets there before I do. I don't have a chance. It's nothing I can do about it. Jesus must have been just tired of these kinds of excuses and tired of those responses. He asked him the question, don't you want to recover? Don't you want to be well? A strange question to ask somebody who's been placed there every morning of his life for 38 years. Well, many of us, when confronted with grace, sometimes are frightened by it because it demands that we respond in a different way. It demands that we put aside the excuses and the whining and the complaining and take up our lives and move on and not look back. But the story turns dark. The man now goes on his way, free, healed and whole, and he confronts the local police, the religious police, who say to him, look, my friend, you can't be carrying your bed around. It's the Sabbath. The Sabbath rules are very clear. You can't do this. You can't break the Sabbath. You can't do anything like this. Why are you out here doing this? Well, he says, he told me I could do it. He said, take up my bed, and I did it. Well, who is he? Well, I don't know. And the crowd was there, and the next thing I know, he slipped away. Well, what did the man then do? He doubles back to try to find out, if he can, who was this man Jesus? And so he comes back and finds the police and said, well, I found out it was Jesus. That's who it was. That's who had said this. Well, then Jesus finds this man in the temple, and he confronts him again in a very harsh and direct way. It says, Jesus found him in the temple and said, all right, now that you're well again, leave your sinful ways, or something worse may happen to you. What an interesting thing that Jesus goes to find this man, because now he's understood that this man is wasting this gift he's just been given. He's wasted the wholeness and the possibility of a new life. He's so weak in his testimony that he's now gone back to find out who Jesus is so he can rat on him, so he can turn him in. And these people had been looking for some sign of Jesus' treason and his disobedience that they could make a case against him. So now this man has handed him over, in a way, to the police. And so that's why Jesus confronts him and says, you better watch out. Something worse could come of you if you continue your sinning. And what was his sin? His sin was not using the gift he had just been given. Not using the grace that had set him free. Not using the grace to stand up for himself. Not using his healing to take a new direction. He still had some healing to do. And so Jesus was going to confront him and make sure that that happened. Well, I often think about the kind of things that go on in most of our lives, and the kind of excuses that we all make. I hear them a lot. I know you do.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
If I could just win the lottery, I'd get out of debt. I married the wrong person. If I'd married somebody different, I would have had a better chance.
All right now.
I tried to get a job, but nobody will give me a job besides my back hurts. I'm too old to change now. The school I went to didn't have good teachers. That's why I don't have a good education, so I can't do. These chains of excuse, these chains that hold us down. Jesus speaks to the very point and says to them, now all of us, you have within you the capability. God has deposited in you your strength, your worth, your value, your truth. Use it. Stand up and speak it. Stand up and live it. Be the person that God intended you to be, not this whining, complaining man waiting on a miracle. A lot of us wait on miracles. I remember one time when I was in college, I was tired of studying. We all got there at one point or another. And I had a big test coming, and I said, well, I'm going to pray, and God will help me get a good grade. Well, God got a D-. And I never went back to God about taking a test again. I was making an excuse for myself and holding on to some magic. I was waiting for an angel to come stir the waters, to do something for me instead of doing something for myself. And so this is how we live our lives sometimes. Chained to excuses. Chained to a place where we have deposited ourselves and we live in our misery and complain and don't see any way out. Well, one of the things that's true, as Pastor spoke this morning, is those of us who are white are chained by our racism. We're chained to the ideas that we grew up with. Chained to the truth that we were told, which is not true. Chained to the reality that it's not our fault, we have no role to play, it's nothing we can do. We have bad schools in the city. It's acknowledged by everybody. But we can't do anything about it. That's not on us. That's the school. We need to cut the bus routes because, well, it's not our fault, the responsibility. The people can get to work somehow, however it is. I was in with my wife a few weeks ago at a pancake IHOP, and I said to the woman who was checking us out, I usually talk to clerks and people, and I said, I bet you got up early this morning, thinking she'd gotten early to come and open the restaurant. She said, yes, I was up at 4 o'clock. I said, wow, you get up that time every morning? She said, yes, I drive in 2 hours from Hohenwald for this job. 2 hours each way to hold on to that job. And I thought, my goodness, what a challenge she has. but what courage she has and what determination she has that she's not going to be put aside for this. How do we, as white folks, people in power, people in places that can make a difference, do we speak up? Does our voice get heard? Do we stand alongside and watch and say, it's out of my hands, out of my control? Jesus puts in each of us that power, possibility, and determination, and grace, and goodness that some of us waste. Even after we've been given it, we continue to waste it. The chains that we bear and the limitations that we complain about have often been put there by our own hands. We have limited ourselves and made ourselves into something that is weak and complaining and not available for one another. I want to tell you a story about someone you may know something about, Viktor Frankl, who was a prisoner during the Nazi regime in what really was a death camp. And he somehow survived because he had some skill. He was formerly a psychiatrist who was taken prisoner. And he tells about his personal life inside this camp. It must have been miserable. I can't even think about how it was. He said, I remember a personal experience. I had terrible sores on my feet from wearing torn shoes. I limped every day with our long column of men to go to our work site. I kept thinking of all the endless problems that made my life so miserable. What would I eat tonight? Would there be enough? If I got a piece of sausage for an extra ration, should I change it for a piece of bread? Should I exchange my last cigarette for a bowl of soup? How can I get a piece of wire to tie my shoe together because I don't have any shoelaces? Would I go to my usual workplace where there's a brutal foreman, or would I get another chance to work in a place that wasn't so cold and threatening? And then he says this, after he's laid out all of his complaints. I became disgusted with the state of affairs that I found myself. And he changed his whole life in that moment. He said this, suddenly I saw myself standing on a platform of a well-lit, warm, and pleasant lecture room. In front of me sat an attentive audience in upholstered seats who had come to hear me talk about the psychology of concentration camps. All that oppressed me in that moment went away. By this method of seeing a different future for myself, I saw and observed that all of these problems I carried were already of the past. I and my troubles were gone. And then he had this to say about others. The prisoner who lost faith in his future was doomed. With his loss of belief in the future, he also lost his spiritual hold and let himself decay. Usually this happened quite suddenly. And we all feared for this moment, not for ourselves, but for our friends. Imagine this man, suddenly in the midst of the worst circumstances that you can possibly imagine, saying, I'm going to leave this moment behind. I'm going to cast myself into the future. I'm going to see myself standing before people, telling them my story and changing lives. And from that moment on, he began to be, in the midst of the worst circumstances possible, a sign of hope and grace and kindness to other people. How much do we have in our own lives that holds us back? What chains us? What ties us down? What excuses do we live by? What limitations do we place upon ourselves and blame others for placing that upon us? What is it that we miss because we don't dig down deep in the grace and goodness that God has planted in us to make a difference for others? When we think about today's Father's Day, What about the fathers and cousins and uncles and even single parent families, the mothers who work to make a stand-in for the fathers, who find a way, instead of making excuses, to make a life for their family? Those people have something that we can use and learn from, indeed. So I invite all of us, each of us, to not be the whining man who lived by his pity pool and made excuses day after day. To do what Jesus said. Pick up your bed, walk, and when you get under your way, don't stop by someplace and piddle around and lose the very gift you've been given. Don't make more excuses. Don't go running to the police. Don't go running to the temple. Don't go running anywhere, but embrace yourself and live out this gift of grace that you've been given. I invite you this morning to hear this lesson of Jesus, who speaks to us in hard terms sometimes, scolds us and challenges us to be the person that God has created us to be. Amen.
Amen.